Hey everybody, how's it going? All right. Sorry about that. Um, so I had to switch up a little bit of the location of where I'm filming this. So we actually have a lot better Wi-Fi here at the rectory than I do over in my office for a little while. So right now it looks like this is where we'll be filming for a little bit. So I've got my beautiful lamp beside me to maybe add some ambiance. I don't know. I I like it. I think it's cool. Um, I love LED lights that make colors. It's truly a weakness of mine, something I really like. But yeah, I hope everybody's doing okay. I see that we've got about 16 people watching right now, which is super duper cool. Blessed Saturday to you. Hope you're having a great weekend. I had a great week. I took the week off just to, I don't know, catch my breath a little bit, maybe do a little bit of relaxing and stuff. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Read some great books. Got to think about some things. So yeah, in the meantime, we've got Sarah here. Sarah, good afternoon, Father Rob. Happy belated Father's Day on the feast of Nativity John the Baptist. Hello, Sarah. Yeah, thanks so much. It's kind of a weird feast day today. So if you're not aware, today, Saturday, June 24th, is the feast of the birth of John the Baptist, and that's a really interesting that's an interesting feast day because we only celebrate three people's births in the church. Like, so most of the time when we have a saint or we have an important feast day, we're celebrating the day that that person died. Do you know the people whose birthday we celebrate, the day that they were born? It's Jesus, so Christmas Day, Mary, the birth of Mary, and the birth of John the Baptist. Now, if you want to do your fun calendar maths, why is the birth of John the Baptist on June 24th? Have you ever wondered that? Because it's really not that hard. Jesus was born on the night of December 24th, so December 25th, kind of. We didn't have clocks, so we don't know. Sometime in the night. What is 6 months from December 24th, 25th? Oh, June 24th. So we know in the scriptures and Gospel of Luke that John is 6 months older than Jesus, that his mother, Elizabeth, has been pregnant with him for 6 months by the time Jesus is announced to the Blessed Virgin Mary. So that's why we have today's feast day falling when it does. It's a really neat feast day, and it's kind of sad that it falls on a Saturday because, unfortunately, the way that the church calendar sort of, I don't know, balances all that is that Sunday is going to take precedence. So unfortunately, we won't have John the Baptist this weekend when you go to Mass, but it's still something that you should celebrate and something that you should remember because it's very much tied to the birth of Jesus. Last random thing, and I'll get to say hi to everybody. I promise I want to say hi to everybody. Why is John the Baptist so important? He's kind of like a weird figure. We hear about him in Advent, and he's kind of like the weird dude who eats bugs in the desert. John the Baptist is super important because John the Baptist is an example of faith in God's promise. So the visitation, right? So after Mary hears that she's going to be the mother of Jesus, it says she sets out in haste to the hill country to meet her cousin Elizabeth, who's pregnant with John. And when Mary finds out that Elizabeth is in fact pregnant, it says that's when she leaps out into her great Magnificat, her great prayer about how God has blessed her. Why does she do that? Well, it's because when she sees that Elizabeth is pregnant, now she knows that the angel's words are true. She knows that it's all real. And so I think I look at the Feast of John the Baptist and kind of the character of John the Baptist as this sort of reminder that God really does keep his promises. So whenever you feel kind of like where's God? Like, is he really worth all this stuff that he's asking? John the Baptist is a really good reminder that, yeah, God really does keep his promises. And sometimes those promises are weird and we don't fully understand how they're going to work out. But yeah, he does keep his promises and they're worth our time. So yeah. Anyway, hi, Sarah. It's good to see you. Really long way to say that. This is from Snows, Tori. Hi, Tori. Good to see you. From Terry. Terry, hi from Houston, Texas, checking in. Good to have you. And Christina, it's good to have you and one of our regulars. And then we've got Sandra Bentley Sexton. Good to have you, Sandra. It's so good to see you. I hope things are going okay where you are. So today, if you saw the little thumbnail, I tried something a little bit different today. I want to talk a little bit before we get into the wonderful questions that you guys have. I want to talk a little bit about our readings for this weekend. Like I said, they're not John the Baptist, unfortunately. They are the I believe it's the 10th, 11th Sunday of Ordinary Time. It's one of those. It's a Sunday in Ordinary Time. It's one of them. And I should know better, but I just know what the readings are. But our readings are taken from the prophet Jeremiah, our very first reading. And I love Jeremiah because Jeremiah kind of feels like the vocation story that I want to tell sometimes. You know, you hear all these stories of like priests and nuns, and they're so pumped about literally everything ever. They're like, oh my gosh, being a priest is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I don't know. It's just never been my cup of tea because it's never been the way my life has worked out. But what I would say is I feel like Jeremiah and thus the scripture backs up my experience a little bit. So Jeremiah is called to be a prophet. And when he's called to be a prophet, God sort of tells him, so, yeah, I'm calling you to be a prophet, but you should be aware everybody is going to hate you. No one is going to listen to you. You're going to be rejected and you're going to die kind of a failure. And that's actually what happened to Jeremiah. He was called to preach to all the Jewish people and to tell them, they were saying, oh, we don't need to worry about all the bad stuff that's going on in the world. We have the temple. God's going to save us, man. It's all good. We've got God. God is on our side. And Jeremiah is like, no, God is 100% not on your side. You have dropped the ball and God isn't here anymore. And so bad stuff's coming. And predictably, that doesn't go over very well with the people. That's not a what's a good word we might use today? We'd say that's not a pastoral message, or it's not uplifting and inspiring, right? Well, sometimes, heads up, God's word is not inspiring. Not in the sense that like it's not inspired, but maybe in the subjective sense of making me feel good. God's word is not therapeutic, right? God's word is a real word. As scripture says, it pierces between soul and body. It's a real strong, sharp-edged sword sometimes. And Jeremiah was called to preach that, but he gets scared, as like everybody does. And so that makes me kind of wonder, what are you afraid of? I was kind of asking myself that. So if you ever sit down and you pray, one good technique that you can do, and this isn't the only one, so don't take this as like dogma, but it's like a suggestion. When you sit down to pray, sometimes notice the things that go through your head. Like notice the thoughts, notice the desires, the emotions. You don't really have to stick with them. Sometimes they're good fodder for prayer, but it's just being aware. So when you sit down to pray, maybe a good task for you next time is to pay attention and to say, what are the things that I'm worried about, right? Do you worry about like, oh, I'm getting fat, and if I'm fat, people will hate me, and if people hate me, that means I'm a loser. So what you're afraid of is being a loser, right? Or I'm going to do this and no one will like me, and my life only has meaning if people like me, right? Ugh. The reason I say this is because in the Christian life, we talk about there's this like hierarchy, or there's supposed to be this arrangement of our love. So like we're supposed to love God first. We're supposed to love our vocation second. There's this whole like ordering of loves. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is when we get when we get that hierarchy of loves wrong, or wait, let me rewind. When someone else gets that hierarchy of loves wrong, we're really quick to point that out. I like to watch, maybe it's kind of sick, but I like to watch these hoarding shows like on YouTube and stuff. They're wild, right? And part of it's that I love looking at their house and saying, yeah, my house is not that bad. Yeah. But there's also something that's kind of sad. And then they're going through they have like 30 sewing machines, and they really can't get rid of one of them, right? They can't get rid of one sewing machine. And you look at that from the outside and you say like, wow, you're missing it, right? Like what's wrong with you? You don't need that stuff. Your love of sewing machines is out of whack. But it's really hard to see when you're the one with the love that's out of whack, right? When you're putting something ahead of your family, putting something ahead of God, putting something ahead of your spouse, putting something ahead of your vocation, putting something ahead of your health. Everybody else is going to look at that and they're going to say, buddy, that ain't right. The church is going to tell you that ain't right, but it's going to be really hard for you to see it. So the reason I say that is because our fears are just like that. The things that we're afraid of kind of define who we are and why we do the stuff that we do. So what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of being a loser? Are you afraid of being a failure? Are you afraid of being rejected? Are you afraid of being poor? Are you afraid of not being influential, not being heard? Are you afraid of getting left behind, right? There's all kinds of things that go on in our head. And yet, God tells us the number one thing we should be afraid of is not fulfilling our vocation, not fulfilling our task. And one of the tasks that God gives us that we hear about in our readings is this task of prophecy. I'm not going to get into this because I'd rather get to your questions because they're way more fun. But just because we got to have a T-ball to get this thing going, right? When God created men and women in the garden, when God made Adam and Eve, or the first humans, however you want to describe that, he created us with not just the image of God, but he actually gave us a task. And the Bible says that men and women, regardless of whether you're a believer or not, baptized or not, this is just part of being a human being made in the image and likeness of God. We're called to be priests of creation. We're called to be kings of creation and queens, but whatever, we'll just monarchs of creation. And we're called to be prophets of creation. So priest, prophet, and king. Now, obviously, if you know your theology, you know that those are the three things Jesus does, and they correspond to the tria munera of the church. Yeah, fine, great. I'm not going there. But I am pointing out something fundamental to us as people, that we're called to be prophets. And a prophet isn't like an old man that stands up and says, "And you're all gonna burn." Right? That's not really what I mean. A prophet is somebody who can make reality transparent. That's a really cool way to put it. I got that from an Orthodox priest, from Father Alex Schmemann, right? That the prophet is called to make things understandable, to make the world like a map, so people can say, "Oh yeah, that's where things are going. Oh yeah, that's the point of all this." We don't do that anymore. We're afraid to say that because as Christians, we're ultimately saying the whole point of reality is God. The whole point of reality is love, is not about selfishness and indulging your every desire and following your dreams. It's about love. It's about giving yourself up to God, laying creation down at the service of God, laying your own life down at the service of God and other people. And we are so afraid of that because there's other prophets out there. There's counter prophets. And I don't mean that like a conspiracy theory, but I call them the prophets of atheism and godlessness. That there's this whole thing that it's scientism. It's saying that reality is about science. It's only about the things we can see. It's only the things we can prove, and nothing else stands a chance. That is a way of interpreting the world, and it is a way of making the world transparent. It's just not what we believe is the correct one. And so I think if we're so afraid of raising our voice and saying what we believe, teaching what the church is and what we're called to be as men and women, we're afraid and our fears are out of whack. And when those fears get out of whack, we start getting anxious, we start getting uncomfortable. And as a church, we start getting unfruitful. So if we start wondering why we're losing people, why we're not retaining our Catholics, it's because we don't have a mission. It's because we don't have something driving us. We're called to be these prophets. And until we're willing to accept the gift of the Holy Spirit to do that, we're not going to bear fruit. So what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of the right stuff? Afraid of the wrong stuff? Now's the time to take stock of that and hopefully start taking the steps to maybe bring that where it needs to be. Yeah. So that's all I have. Hope that's helpful. Kind of a neat thought as you go into the readings. Think about Jeremiah. Jesus says, don't fear those who can kill the body. Fear the one who can kill both soul and body in Gehenna. No, he's not talking about the devil. He's talking about his Father. So fear God. God first. And specifically God, fear God in the sense of what he has called you to do. Maybe not afraid of him like a big, scary lightning bolt man in the skies. But yeah, let's get to your questions. Let's see what we got here. This one's from Sarah. Sarah got here first, so we'll do yours, Sarah. You said, just found out this week, St. John the Baptist or St. John the Evangelist, my bad, is always portrayed without a beard because he was very young. Your thoughts? All right, so my thoughts are, I don't know. And I get the idea. So the idea is that we want to, all the apostles get sort of a marker. So Judas might have like a money bag, or another big common way to depict Judas is he's facing the other direction from the other apostles, like at the Last Supper. Peter normally gets depicted with the keys, and John gets depicted without a beard because he's supposed to be the youngest. The reason that he's the youngest is that he lives the longest. Okay. So there's strengths and weaknesses to that argument. And like I said, this is all opinion. You are 100% allowed to say, Father Rob, you're full of it. I don't care. You're right. You're allowed to say that. I'll tell you when you can't say that. I'm not speaking as the church, just a thought. So what I would say is, number one, John did live the longest. We do know that he lived the longest, and that his experience of the church itself saw the most development. So John's letters and John's gospel reflect an experience of Jesus that's kind of been like chewed on. So if you ever want to think about this, listen to a young priest preach and listen to an old priest preach. Now, it's easy to just read that like along the political lines, like, well, this guy's conservative, this guy's liberal, this guy's traditional, this guy's progressive, like whatever. I mean, listen to the kind of the secret sauce that they bring to their talk. So a lot of times a young priest will be very energetic and very just kind of facts, right? You think about like a boxing match. He's just throwing jabs, right? Jab, 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 hook, right? He's going at it. A lot of times for young priests, there's no fluff. They're willing to say the hard stuff, maybe offend people. They might tell a funny story, but really they're there for doctrine. Now, what's the old guy sound like? Well, a lot of times the old guy is a little bit longer because he's not really in a rush and he's not really worried about the way you feel about him. He's got a more like digested. That's a weird word to come to my head, but it's what's coming to my head, right? He's got a more like well digested, like he's kind of chewed on this for a little while, kind of like a cow, like they just chew on stuff. Like he's thought about this longer than I've been alive. And a lot of times that comes through in that they're slow. They talk about things with more poetic imagery and a lot less like in your face claims. So John does this. John speaks more poetically. Jesus's talks are very long. They're very high. They're very far reaching. But so that kind of gives this idea that John's been there, right? His letters talk about Gnosticism, which sort of creeps into the church around 90 to 100-ish AD. So he's got a more mature view of Jesus, and he's got a more historically kind of later view of the church. So yeah, John might be young in the depictions because he lives to be pretty old. But then the other side of that I just can't really shake is that most of the apostles were killed. They didn't die natural deaths. So, John could very well be the same age as them. He just doesn't get killed. You know what I mean? So if you have like 12 guys and 11 of them are murdered, well, yeah, right? Is it fair to say, well, John was obviously the youngest because he lived the longest? Well, no, John just didn't get killed. So I don't know, right? Kind of hard to tell. I personally like iconic imagery because it helps me as a big dumb idiot understand who's who. So yeah, that's a really long way to say it. It's just something, those are just sort of my thoughts. And let's move on. This one's from Terry. It says, you need to buy a. I'm sorry, Terry, I didn't get the last bit of what I need to buy. So let me know and I will get back to you there. Our next one here is from Christina. It says, my question, Father Rob, earlier this month you discussed the struggles a young priest or seminarian can experience. Good advice. Last week, our newly ordained priest celebrated Mass, and when he finished the homily, many of us were on the verge of tears. And my first thought was, he gets it. Father Stephen is not yet 30, but a local young man. Why are some priests so ready for ministry? Then others seem to follow the pack. Frankly, many of us need to hear a sermon. Well, I think that's awesome. Thank you so much for supporting your priest. That is really, really key. I was thinking last week, I didn't come on Ask a Priest last week because I was heading out, but last week Jesus talked about the need to pray to send laborers into the harvest. And one of the things that came to my mind was, why would a laborer not go into the harvest, right? So imagine economics, like we got our labor market. So why would somebody not go into that harvest? And the things I kept coming up with, and granted, this is just my mind, so maybe there's something I'm missing. But number one, it's a problem with the laborer. So the laborer might say, I think this job is hard. This job doesn't pay enough. This job is beyond what I'm able to do, right? I don't want to do it. Something kind of on the labor. So maybe for the priesthood, it would be like, I don't want to do celibacy. I don't like people that much. I have a hard time speaking in public. I don't know dogma very well. That kind of thing, right? Like there might be a problem with the labor. Another reason, though, why you might not have laborers in the harvest is because the harvest is not valuable. It's not valuable to the laborer. So what I mean by that is, if you have this giant job that's tough, it's demanding, it requires quite a bit and doesn't really pay like other jobs, the work itself has to be super valuable if you want to get people involved in it. So I look at something like Doctors Without Borders, right? Red Cross, one of these charitable organizations. They don't pay very well, right? It's charity work. You're not in this for the money. Why do people do this stuff? Well, it's because they see the work itself as valuable. Okay, so now let's take that to the church. Yeah, priesthood is hard, and some guys don't want to do it just because it's hard or they don't have the natural aptitude. But I think a lot of guys don't do it because they don't find the harvest valuable. They don't find the work valuable. And that's because we haven't made ourselves a valuable harvest. So if we want to have young priests, if we not just young priests, we want to have priests at all, we want to have any kind of leadership in our community, we need to show that our community is something worth leading, that our church is something worth serving, that this job is worth it. And one of the ways we can do that, and I say this too as a Catholic, is by being good Catholics, by being good harvest, right? Show them that this is worth it. It doesn't mean you have to fawn over and be like, oh my gosh, Father's amazing. Or you have to float his ego, right? You got to like pump him up like a ever deflating beach ball. No. I just mean that maybe it's a good thing to be good Catholics. Go to mass, go to confession, pray, go to adoration, do the things the church asks you to do. Don't make your priest feel like he has to pull teeth. Show him that this is a life that you want to live and that you want to be led, because that's, I don't know. I think that's really cool. But to answer your question, why do some people sort of have this natural readiness and others don't? I don't know. I really don't know. The only thing that I can come to is the idea that God kind of prepares people by their life for the ministry that he has in mind. When I was in seminary, there was a quote that I really liked, and I still use this sometimes, and I know it's tacky, so I'm sorry. But God doesn't call the qualified. God qualifies the called. So God doesn't call people to any job, ministry, marriage, leadership, in any job. God doesn't call them because they're qualified. Now that might be a human thing. So the church itself is going to look at that and say, yeah, are you, able to live by yourself celibately? Are you able to handle money? Are you able to pay the bills? That kind of thing. But fundamentally, what's more important is God's call, that God actually qualifies us by his calling. What does God tell the prophet Jeremiah? Say not, I am too young. Right? I have made you a pillar of brass, a fortified wall against these people, right? God is the one who makes us ready. And so I think some of these guys, even if they're young, have kind of, we don't know what they've been through. And even if we do, we don't know what that means, because that's kind of an interior thing. So yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful parts about a vocation, is that you kind of get the way that God has been sort of cooking a person and getting them ready for the job that they have in front of them. And that's going to look different for everybody. So I think that's super cool. Yeah. But great question. Let's get down here. This is from La D. It says, how to be in service to the Lord when physically debilitated and physically limited to actively contribute to the parish. Okay. Wonderful question. That's awesome. So first off, thank you for wanting to be involved, even though you're physically limited. So what I would say is, do what you can do and don't do what you can't. Sounds obvious, but I think a lot of people need to hear that. So, well, number one, when I go, let's think of the most extreme example and kind of work backwards because that's easier. So, most extreme example. Imagine somebody stuck in a nursing home. I remember there was a lady I used to go visit every week. Her name was Alpha Carroll. Alpha was a real funny lady. She wasn't super old, but she had a rough life. She was from Pikeville. She was, kind of a local lady, but she became Catholic back in the 80s and her family disowned her, like totally disowned her. And when she got sick, they just threw her in the nursing home and never visited her. So her catechesis wasn't perfect. Her grasp of the faith was not by any means, you know, outstanding. But I remember going to visit her, and the sort of narrative that I played in my head was that I was going to visit one of those early church confessors, right? Not in the sense of confession, but a confessor in the sense of somebody who was not a martyr, but was basically a martyr, right? And I remember listening to Alpha, and I just thought, yeah, this is kind of like one of those early church confessors, one of these early church martyr, not martyr, right? So yeah. Um, so first off, I think you have a service to offer to the church, even if you're physically debilitated. So I always told Alpha that she needed to pray for me because she was basically a martyr, or at least I considered her sort of a martyr. And so I was like, you got to pray for me. I need this. So first off, your prayers matter in a very special way. They matter in a way that the prayers of the active people can't quite measure up to. And that's both because of your experience, but it's also because of the suffering you endure. And we believe that, what does Paul say? That we make up on our own bodies what's lacking in the sufferings of Christ for his church. So your suffering is Christ's suffering, and Christ's suffering is necessary for the world. So you are doing something very, very necessary, and you're doing it with Jesus. Very important. But the other thing I would say that you can do is, if you want to find more, let's scoot down a little bit from the nursing home side to just somebody who has some physical limitations. So I would say go to the thing that you can go to. So if you can make it to mass, go to mass. If you can make it to adoration, go to adoration. If you can make it to parish social events and Bible studies, yeah, do those. If you can't, don't worry about it. Right? One thing that you can do that I've thought about a lot during COVID, right? During COVID, I remember with the Eastern Church, with the Melkites, our bishop the Melkite bishop had a really good talk he gave us all on Zoom. And he said, pick up the phone, call your people. So maybe one thing you can do, even if you're physically debilitated, is get a list of the shut-ins and the sick people and all the people in the hospital and the nursing home in your parish. And if you want to, maybe your service to them could be to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, do you need anything? Do you want to pray about anything? Are you okay? Are you sad? Are you lonely? Because if you're stuck at home, maybe you know a little bit of what that feels like. So just kind of a thought, like if you want to be involved, there's neat ways to do it. I know our parish, when we do things like Bible studies, we try to offer a Zoom option. So maybe there's a way to be involved with technology, or if you're not comfortable with that, and all you can do is go to mass when you can go to mass, great. Let the priest know, or let your parish know that you're debilitated and that you would like to have communion or something, just, I would just challenge you maybe to be creative with your situation, because you do matter. You matter to your parish and you matter to God. And I think we need to find a way to leverage that. And it's not going to be perfect, but it's something, right? It's something, because you do matter, and the church needs you. So thanks for your question. Great thing to think about. Let's go down here to Regina. Regina says, good afternoon. What diocese do you belong to? Are you from an order? When did you get ordained? The color of the mic is so distracting. Well, sorry about the mic. That is what it is. What I would say is, I'm a priest of the Diocese of Lexington in Kentucky. So I'm a diocesan priest, and I was ordained in 2016. Unfortunately, our diocese gets that wrong, and they say it was 2017. I was there. It was, in fact, 2016. So yeah, I've been a priest now for 7 years, going on number 8. And yeah, still here. Thanks for your question. Terry, the lava lamp. Yes, I do. I used to have a lava lamp when I was in seminary. It was actually when I was in college seminary. So I remember, I don't know if you guys remember, it was the swine flu. That was like 2009, fall of 2009. So I got the swine flu when I was in college seminary, and I had a fever like none other. Like I've never ever had a fever this bad. And I was in an apartment with like four other seminarians. It was way too full. Like it was way too many guys in one apartment. And I remember going out I had this fever. And so I went out into the living room and I stared at the lava lamp. And I swear that at like 2 a.m, feverish me, I thought the lava lamp was talking to me. And I remember just staring at it. And I was like, I'm having a telepathic communication with a lava lamp. And I love it. So yeah, I have a I want to say pleasant memories of a lava lamp, maybe profound, if not pleasant. But yeah, I could certainly use one. This is my sister being nice. Rob's so cool. He's a bunch of cool stuff. He's an amazing person in general. See, you should listen to my sister. She's nice. Thanks to her. So, yeah, I just think it's really I'm stuck on the whole what we can do to be involved in our parish. And the reason I say that is just because like I hear a lot of people give up, and I give up too. I'm not blaming older people because gosh, I mean, ugh, it's not their fault. I find sometimes I do the same thing. Like it's really tempting to make the perfect the enemy of the good. And I'm not a hippie, so don't hear that. Don't hear it like, well, you gotta like, but really, how many times do we say like when I make a podcast for Catholic Link. So it's the Catholic Link podcast. You should go check it out, by the way. Go check out Catholic Link podcast. Give me those downloads because it makes me look better and makes me feel good. And I like feeling good. But but in all seriousness, it can be really tempting when I listen to other podcasts that priests do. It can be really really tempting to be like, oh gosh, these guys really have it together. They'll have like that kind of hippie guitar thing, like boom, 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 and they've got like a little intro, and it's all perfectly edited and put together. And then my thing's just like, hey, here's me talking. I'm talking on my microphone. By the way, it looks like this. It's this microphone. I love this microphone. Um, and you know, the way that I think about it, and the way that I've learned from, I watch classes on how to do YouTube, how to do podcasts. Like I am willing to learn, but the big thing that I keep hearing is that sometimes you just gotta get started. And I think the same thing can happen in a parish. Sometimes you just gotta get started. So I'll share one thing, and then hopefully we'll get some more questions. One of the things that I've heard is that we had a lot of people in the parish who wanted a directory, like a photo directory of our members, and I wasn't really big on that. Not because it's expensive, not because not because it's not no doctrine. It was just honestly, it's going to be a pain. It's going to be a pain. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to put the effort into it. And I remember thinking like, oh, if I do this, it's going to cost the parish all this money and no one's going to do it. And it's going to be a whole extra job and blah, 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 blah. And I kept kind of piling up all of these excuses about why I didn't want to do it. And eventually I brought it to one of my staff members and I said, hey, could you make a phone call and we'll see. I figured that we'd get a quote from one of these companies and it would just be like astronomical. And then I would be able to tell the people like, well, let me tell you how much that costs. And it turns out it's really not that expensive and it's really not that hard. And I'm just full of it and need to shut my mouth and learn to do what I need to do. So I think that that's kind of a really goofy way to talk about it. But I think that sometimes we do that with the way we want to be involved in our parish, the way we want to help, the way we want to kind of share stuff. So one thing I found a lot in my parish here in Pikeville is that we have a lot of babies now. Surprisingly, so they built this place and there's like a tiny little cry room and now we have all the babies. So, good problem to have, but some people have a hard time with babies making noise at mass because we have like poured concrete floor and it's like, it's loud. Right. And little kids have a hard time keeping still. So I have half the people come up and will say that they love having the babies because it's a great pro-life witness and it's a great family welcoming, all that stuff. And I'm right there with them. Then I have other people, particularly those with hearing problems, like some older people, if they have hearing aids, they find it distracting. And I kind of feel for them too, because it's hard to preach, it's hard to do stuff when you're competing, let's say. And so one of the things I found that was really, really cool is some older people, some, like, we have a few grandmas, a few people who, they're empty nesters sort of, and they've just kind of helped out with some of the kids. They go help out some of the moms, or they, let the older kids sit with them. And that's one of my favorite parts of a small parish, but I just think that's one of those ways that people just fixed it, right? They just got involved. They didn't sit there and be like, well, if we help this kid one time, it's going to be our thing. Like they just did it. And it's really beautiful. I think there's something really beautiful with an older couple, right? Couple in their 80s that lets a 5-year-old sit with them because mom needs a break. I'm still, those kind of things. I don't want to get sentimental, but those things really speak to me as a priest. And I think that those are just kind of ways that even people who are physically not at their peak are still really necessary, right? So these older couples now are actually really helping, right? They're really a part of things. And we've got people who stepped up, and we have a Hispanic family that stepped up and started helping out with coffee and donuts. One time the lady brought tres leches cake, and that was so cool. It was so cool. So yeah, that's my long rant. And please be involved in your parish, and don't feel like you don't matter, because you do have something to offer, even if it is, your prayers, because that's really important. And you got a phone, and that's a really great way to kind of get involved. So pick up the phone and help with the babies and stuff. Good pro-life, good Christian witness, and you're just nice, because I'm sure those moms and dads also appreciate some of the help at Mass. Yeah. Let's see. Here's a good one from Sarah too. It says, we all have different gifts to share with the church. She was previously a sacristan, but now it's a gift bearer ministry and help with the changeover. Believe it or not, you'd like to be behind the scenes. Wow. That's a really important job. I will confess. I confess this. I am confessing. We don't pass the basket anymore in my parish here. And the reason being is because I couldn't find people to kind of usher. And I had a lot of masses where we would pass the basket and there was no ushers. And then I'm like standing at the altar being like, and now I would really appreciate it if we could have somebody pass the collection, because we sure do need to have the lights on this week, right? You want lights? Let's have a collection, right? So yeah, it's a good job. That is really important. But I will confess that we still have baskets at the front of church. And, I kind of look at it like, when I was at St. George and Jenkins, I used to have 2 parishes. Now I have 1. At St. George, they always had a basket. It's like a box with a hole drilled in top, and that was their offering. And the reason when I was first ordained, I remember walking in and being like, oh, well, I don't like this. We really need to have a collection, because I wasn't quite practical yet, because I wasn't the pastor. I didn't need to worry about the money, but I was thinking highfalutin. I was like, well, it is the people's offering, and it is their way of contributing to the sacrifice. And one of the ladies after church pulled me aside, because I had talked. I was like, we're going to switch this up. We're going to change it. And I remember she pulled me aside and she said something that I did not expect. And she told me, the reason that we do this is because we're a really poor parish, and some families are really embarrassed when the basket comes around and they can't put anything in. So the reason that we've done it like this for the past few years is actually not to embarrass some of our people. And that was humbling. It was really humbling. And I didn't change it, right? I kept that. And during COVID, when that happened here in the bigger parish, I went to the basket model. Not because, like I said, I'm not opposed to passing the basket. There's a lot of great stuff there, but I do think that, I think that that can be a way to keep people who can't afford it or can't afford to give like everybody else. It can give them a little bit of privacy. I don't know, but just a thought. This is from Z853C. Always good questions. Dear Father, I've heard one can walk up during the Eucharist with the arm crossed before the chest to indicate the inability to receive but still get a blessing. Is this a thing? Would the assistants recognize it? So I would say this. Technically, the U.S. bishops have asked that we don't come up for blessings during communion. This is the United States, bishops. So if you don't live in the United States, it's a different rule. It is what it is. Here's my thought on this. So technically the bishop said that we're not supposed to give a blessing with the sign of the cross. So what I do, I copy what I've watched my bishop do. And what my bishop does, and I put it this way because I think it's true. The bishop is the chief liturgist, the priest of the diocese. And so I kind of do what he does. And when people come up with their arms crossed, he just puts their hand on top of their head, right? And he might say, "God bless you," or something like that. So why is this practice coming around? I think that's sort of your question. So can one do it? Yeah, I think you can. I think you can. I think it's fine. But why would you do it? And one of the reasons I think that this practice has come up is for a couple reasons. So number one is someone may not be Catholic. So if you go to mass, I don't know how it is in other countries. Well, I do know how it is in other countries. I don't know how it is where you are. I know how it is in my diocese. When people go up for communion, I call it a Chinese fire drill. So a Chinese fire drill is one row stands up, they all go out in the center, they come up, receive communion, and it's just pew by pew. And so the reason that kind of matters in terms of what we're talking about is that very system of receiving communion can make you stick out like a sore thumb if you're not going to receive or if you're not able to receive. And a lot of times it's pressure to try to receive because you don't know what else to do. So I find that giving people the option to cross their arms sort of gives them an out, because technically they should just sit in their pew. But the system doesn't encourage that. The physical system doesn't really work like that. So I think giving people an out, it keeps them, number one, from feeling like they can't. But number two is, if you're Catholic and you're not supposed to receive communion because you haven't gone to confession, or even if you just haven't kept the fast, which if you can't keep the fast, I mean, please tell me how you do that, because I really don't know how you could possibly not keep an hour fast. I'm literally baffled. But moving on, it gives people like an option. It gives them a way to not embarrass themselves. And I think that's important, because if we leave people sitting in the pew, so like, let's say, you got Cousin Timmy, and Cousin Timmy's Catholic, but he just kind of hangs out in the pew when everyone goes to communion. They're going to be like, what's his problem? What's he doing? And that's really not fair to him. That's not what the church teaches about an inability to receive communion. So I feel like it gives somebody the privacy that they deserve, but it also gives them an out to do what they need to do. So yeah, that's my take. I don't know whether or not the assistants would recognize it. I don't know, but I do think it's a neat out. And there's kind of a neat little sense of people kind of developing that stuff. So yeah, long answer, but I hope that helps. Oh, this is from Moses was a basket case. Yes, he was. I actually watched a video about how those papyrus baskets are made. And did you know some of those baskets from the time of Moses are still around and can still carry stuff? And it's made out of, like, you take the papyrus and it's like the very liquid and oil in the papyrus. When you mash it on top of stuff, big heavy rocks, it makes a glue. It's like a plant that is its own glue. That is so cool. It's just so cool. That's a nerd moment. I think it's so cool. Papyrus is wild. People come up with the coolest ideas, and that makes me happy. And I'll be honest that I'm a pessimist, so I kind of like having these moments. This is from Peggy. Hi, Peggy. It's good to see you. Hope you're doing well. It's been way too long since I've seen you guys. Hope everything's okay. Miss seeing you at the diocese. All right. Well, I will have to probably cut it here. I actually have some people I'm getting ready for first communion. So say a prayer for them. They're actually going to go do their first communion in another country. So yeah, so I've got to get them ready. But I do have one question real quick. This is from Snow. This is a great one. Are you allowed to bless pets? Yes, and yes. Yes, we do in fact bless pets. Well, how do we bless pets? I will share a link one time. It's from an Orthodox YouTube channel, but it's really good. And it's about animals. So what is God's take on animals? Well, God
really likes animals, surprisingly, right? Do they have immortal souls like people? No. Does that mean that they're useless? No. So, how do angels appear in the Bible? How do angels appear, right? So it says angels appear with the head of a lion, with the head of a man, with the head of an eagle, right? The Holy Spirit appears as a dove. God would never, never, ever, ever, ever use an animal to reveal himself, but he does. But he does, right? Jesus, the Lamb of God, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Like animals are a big deal. The four Gospels are depicted as animals for the most part, except for one of them, but that's different. So yeah, we do bless pets, and yeah, Sarah's making a good point that it can be done on the feast of St. Francis, but you can also kind of do it whenever. So one thing people don't realize, if you get a new dog or you get a horse or whatever, like yeah, priest can go bless it, because animals are an important part of God's plan, right? God uses animals for his will, and God uses animals to show his glory. And in fact, I personally believe that animals will be a part of the resurrection at the end of time. That's personal belief, but Jesus cares about animals, and God wouldn't have made them if he thought they were useless. So yeah, nice parting thought to end on. Anyway, I do have to end now. But thank you all so much for your good questions. Thank you for tuning in. I'm sorry if the colors are a little different, but it's what I got. And hope to see you next week. Until then, take care and God bless. And I will see you then.